Hello there, and welcome back to my art table. I often work with textures, as you know, and today I'm going to work with something a little bit different. It is a texture. I don't know if you've used this. It's the fiber paste, and the reason that you would use with this texture is it gives you a sort of an absorbent ground. There is a medium called absorbent ground that Golden has, and I do have some of that. And this is a little more fibery than absorbent ground. Absorbent ground is very thin, and you can apply it, and what it does is it makes your canvas kind of act like paper. And if you want more of a watercolor effect, you know that you have to use something absorbent generally, or it helps. It kind of mimics the tooth of paper. So you can kind of get those washy effects like you do with watercolors. It's not exact, but I kind of like to use it because I like to get that real soft effect sometimes. So what I'm doing is, again, that's absorbent ground. The fiber paste gives you something like that, but it adds a little more texture. The absorbent ground doesn't add texture, it just adds absorbency to your canvas if you just want that. If you want a little texture, a little grit, this is kind of dries a little rough. It's not like a smooth like the heavy gels and things. Those dry smoother. This will give you a bit of almost a little bit of a sandy feel, and it's kind of unique. I like it for different types of texture paintings that I do, and this is going to help in helping us get a kind of washy feeling on our painting in some areas. So again, this is just a canvas board. It's 8 by 10, working small so I can fit in the camera frame here. But you can apply these techniques to any size canvas you want. So again, there's a caveat. It doesn't always transfer exactly. You have to do some certain things on larger canvases that you don't do on small canvases, but that's a whole nother tutorial. This, you can generally transfer a lot of these general ideas to larger canvas. So all I've done is I've prepped my entire surface with a coat of titanium white. You can do that, you can use a gesso, you can even use a color paint, whatever you want. I like to use a coat of titanium white just to give me a nice kind of smoothness and remove just a little of the tooth of the canvas, give me a little base. Then I put my textures down, then I apply color. Sometimes I will put another coat of titanium white on top of it before I do my colors, just depends. So this is what I've got, and this is what my texture looks like, if you can kind of see that. And then we'll come back once this is very dry, so it's going to take a couple days to really get good and dry, and then we'll come back and I'll put color in. Okay, so I let that dry. I actually cheated a bit with my handy dandy blow dryer and dried that a little bit. I'm going to bring a little more white onto this, just a little bit. Kind of scrumble that around because I don't want it to be perfect. I want a bit of an abstract look up there. So I'm just using whatever white I have left on my palette on my flat brush and bringing that down just to cover up some of that. Now what you can do also is you could create another layer of light white and then remove some of it with a sponge or a dry paper towel. Make sure your utensil that you're using is dry though, because if it's wet, all it will do is smear the paint around. And if you want to remove it, you need to make sure that it's a dry tool. So this is pretty dry. I haven't added any extra water to my brush, and that's why it's able to do that. And I don't know if you can see that effect, but it's just kind of removed a little bit. You'll be able to see it in the final painting, in the final photos. So now what I have is a little, and this is something else I was doing, so I'm going to use it. It's a little phthalo blue and metallic gold. Just these right here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring a little bit of this into my painting. And what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to put down the gold first and then come over it with a wash of blue. So let's see how that kind of works. There's a little blue and gold on my brush, so you can see what I'm getting there. Just laying that down. There's more gold on one side. I'm going to kind of increase the gold quotient right there. And the texture is picking that up pretty well. So normally what I do is I'll lay down color and I'll put metallics on top. I'm doing it a little bit in reverse on this one. So we'll see how that works. This is giving me a bit of a green effect because obviously gold is yellow and the phthalo is a blue-green shade. So I'm going to go ahead and quick dry this with my blow dryer, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the wash of blue on that. So I've dried that, and that was pretty quick dry, and you can see the metallic on there, kind of glimmery. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some mist to my canvas. Not too much, because when you quick dry, everything's not fully dry, so I don't want anything to get too diluted, but just enough where I can actually go ahead and start laying down some additional texture and wash on this with the flat brush that I'm using. And I just have that on my brush like that, and as you can see, it's picking up on the texture, and it is giving me a wash of color in the areas where I have the water, and I'm kind of digging that a lot. So I'm just gonna, don't want to mess that up too much, so let's see, bring that down. So I have a real watercolory effect kind of happening down in here. I think I shouldn't have put that other water on, but that's okay. We can fix such things. A damp sponge. And we're going to just remove some of that. It got a little diluted. Kind of soften the bottom here a bit, just a little, because I don't want this to be full-on color. So a little water on my sponge is gonna kind of help me remove some of that, and I'm gonna take a dry paper towel and probably remove just a little bit of this because this sponge is damp. So a little bit of dry paper towel will kind of help me blot some of that off. But as you can see, with this fiber texture, what I'm getting is a nice kind of washy, watercolory effect, but I'm also getting that interesting texture that you won't get with just straight watercolors, obviously. So I kind of like it for that, because instead of getting you know, just a full-on watercolor or a full-on texture. You're getting a little bit of both. And sometimes little happy accidents happen. Like the blue kind of bled up into this top area, which I wasn't really intending on, but I like it because it's tying it together. So in art, as you know, if you are an artist or just like to create on your Sunday afternoons or whatever, you'll find lots of little things happen that maybe you don't intend on, but you end up liking. Some, of course, you don't like, and you're kind of, you know, letting loose with the words to say, why did I do that? I liked it before. And unfortunately, unlike a computer, you can't hit the back button and delete and all that. Sometimes I wish I could with my paintings. But you learn how to fix those mistakes as you go along and how to actually incorporate them in your painting so they look like they were intended. So this is what we have. It's kind of a landscape looking painting with kind of a very washy look. I'm going to come back, I'm going to lay another layer of paint down and a little more metallic to make it pop. But this is where we're at right now, and you can see that interesting fiber texture that's picking up the bits of blue and gold. So I'm going to let this dry really well, and then I'll come back with some glaze and lay that down and some metallic on top. Okay, welcome back. My painting has dried, and I have mixed a little bit on the little lid palette that I'm doing. This is a small painting, so I'm just using a small palette. I've mixed with my gold and my blue that were left over. I just put a little bit of my glaze mix, which is just a satin gloss glaze. You can use one or the other or both. Like, I like the mix because it gives me a real nice pretty look. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of that down like I did right here and perhaps right here. I don't want this all over the bottom because I kind of want a pretty water look effect. And so as you can see, this is a very light paint consistency. It's not a thick impasto or anything like that. We're just doing a very light. I've got a little bit of water on a paper towel, and I'm just going to kind of blot that away and bring that down like that. So I'm kind of left with a little bit of color, but not a ton. And it looks very kind of water reflection type situation. Leave it a little thicker there, maybe a little on the edge. And that is kind of how you can create that effect, one way anyway. I'm going to take a little more water and just do a little more removal just on a couple of spots here. So you can kind of finesse that, play with it until you get it kind of where you want it. Got a little white here, I might add just a little of that down here. I just happen to have this, you know, still wet a little bit on my brush, so I'm just laying down what's on the brush. I'm not even picking up any additional paint. I'm working with what I have here just to drop down a little bit of lightness. I don't really want white, I just want lightness. So that's what this is giving me essentially. And I really like how the blue did kind of bleed up on the top there. It's giving me a real pretty look. So that's giving me a lot of kind of white on the bottom. I'm just going to lay a little more glaze down on top of my blue here. Just picking it up on my paper towel and just laying down a little bit on top just to pick up a little more blue in a couple spots. And this is a real light-handed painting. There's not a lot of thick texture, thick paint or anything like that. It's going to give you kind of a real ethereal, soft kind of calm look, which I happen to tend to like in landscapes. So this is where we're at right now. I'm gonna let that dry just a bit, maybe run it over my blow dryer, and then I'm gonna come back and do another coat. And that is how I work with glazes and paints like this. It's multiple coats, multiple drying times. It's kind of, you know, you gotta have a little bit of patience when you work with glazes and things, but you get a very pretty translucent look in the end. Okay, so we have dried the canvas and let that get nice and dry. Taken a look at it, and I am going to be done with the blue. And what I've done now is I have just laid down a little bit of gold right here using a flat brush, picking some up on my brush. I don't want a lot, so this is a very little bit. I'm just kind of picking up a little bit, just enough that I can drop down a few glimmers. And I'm just gonna drop that down right there. Oh, that's so pretty. And kind of just cascade that down a bit. So there's a little bit of gold on the top and a little coming from underneath, which is really pretty, a nice effect. So again, I'm just picking up, and I mean, I used like a tiny drop, a pea size, and I'm just picking some up on my brush, flat brushing it, and I'm just gonna, I don't want a lot, I don't want it mixed all around. I want to make sure my brush is pretty dry, because if it's wet, all it's going to do is disperse, and that's really not what I'm trying to go for here. So I'm going to put some down over here. There was quite a bit coming through from the bottom here, so I'm just going to kind of bring that down like it's on top and underneath, which is very cool, in my opinion. A little more gold right here. And with metallics like this, you don't want to overdo it. I mean, it's really like an accent. You know, you don't want too much. You just want bits to pick up the light, to keep it very, a little more sophisticated, I guess, in my opinion. Versus just tons and tons of glimmer. There's paintings where you want to do that, but this is not what I'm going for here. A little bit of whiteness right there that I'm not liking how that's showing through, so I've got a little color on my brush still with my glazes. I'm going to go ahead and go over that. Any spots, you know, where the canvas is coming through, at the end just kind of finish up. Let it bake for a second, essentially, and the canvas will kind of absorb that paint, and then you can remove it. So you can kind of do that if you want to have a little bit of paint, but you don't want a ton. You just kind of let it bake on there for a sec, and then come back by, and don't leave it too long, but you know, it'll absorb in there, so maybe you just get the amount of color you want without full-on color. A little gold there I'm hoping to drop down. There. Kind of pressing that. There we go. There. And so that's really the final effect that I'm doing. Again, that was just a metallic gold. The paints I use these are the Liquitex. I've got a Blick brand here. I use a lot of Liquitex, and I love the golden high flow and golden fluids, and the soft bodies. They're all great. But anyways, I'm just doing this because these are quick and easy to get out of the tube and nice and fresh to work with. So again, I've got a couple little spots here. I'm just gonna finesse this a bit. I'm gonna let it dry, put my final coat of glaze on it, and I'm going to then post the final images. But that is how you can work with a fiber paste. And essentially, if I've just used, except for the little bit of bronze and the white, which I kind of use as like the salt and pepper of seasoning, you know, it's kind of ever present. Really, it's a two-color painting. It's just the blue and the metallic gold that we've laid down, and you're getting different tones of it by mixing the colors together or with a little bit of white or whatever. But essentially, that's a pretty simple landscape, kind of waterscape painting. And that's where we're at the final look. Again, when I put the final glaze on it, it's going to have a real pretty luster. All right, thanks so much for watching this tutorial. I do plan to do more. I'm a little slow lately. I would love if you would comment, let me know what you think, and like and subscribe and all that. And please go to my site at facetimeart.com and sign up for my Art Insiders list. You not only get 10% off everything in my Etsy store, if you're so inclined, but I also send out a free print download every month and some other little goodies. So I'm not going to bombard you with emails or anything, but you do get a couple of free goodies during the month. So you might want to do that. Again, that's facetimeart.com. And again, thank you so much for watching and all your comments and likes and subscribes. It really spurs me on to do more of these. And until next time, keep creating.